we'll give it a few minutes for everything to get going. I was looking at last week's, I think, YouTube video. Yeah, I was on YouTube. It seems to cut off a good bit of the first beginning here, so we'll give it a second to get going. Sorry if you're watching on Facebook and have to listen to me ramble and stall for all the streaming to get going well, but that's part of live streaming, I suppose. So I hope that you all are doing fantastic, having a good morning so far, had a fantastic weekend, and thanks so much for joining me today for our live Monday music motivation. This one is gonna be kind of interesting, maybe a tiny bit different. I want to talk a little bit in more detail about specifically flow states and why it's important to find a flow state and what a flow state even is. And hopefully after you understand what a flow state is, that will give you a little bit of sort of motivation, and at the end I'll leave something just a little bit tangible to help you find the flow state in your practice, to sort of inspire and motivate you for this week of practice. So starting off with what a flow state is, this idea of flow and finding a flow state largely comes from a researcher named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Not sure if that's how you pronounce it, and absolutely cannot tell you how to spell that. But if you just Google flow state, you'll find his research on the topic. What a flow state is, though, without having to know the research or know the research behind it, you've all experienced a flow state before. And what it is when you're sort of in the flow, in the zone, really focusing on something really deeply, and so much so that you really sort of lose track of time. Maybe you've done this with playing the clarinet or making music, where you kind of lose track of time. Oftentimes in performances, you'll find this where you go to start performing and it just flies by and you're like, wow, I just played an hour-long concert and it felt like 5 or 10 minutes. That's an example of flow state. This can happen in all areas of life, whether it's something you're working on, something fun, playing a game also can sort of trigger that. And it's anytime you have that sensation of like, wow, the time really flew by, or you're working on something for hours and like realize that you forgot to eat or like haven't gone to the bathroom in hours. So those kinds of things where you're really in the zone and really focusing. Now, the reason I think why a flow state is so important and why it can be really beneficial to look for that in our practice is because I think that's when the deepest learning and sort of the highest brain functioning is happening. Again, I think the research on flow states talks about this and goes more into this, of course. But what it really is our learning happens when our brains are engaged. If you're just going through the motions and not thinking about it, there's a little bit of learning that's happening, but not a lot, because your brain thinks, okay, like this is just automatic. I'm just doing this automatically. I don't need to really latch on to this. When something is so like scary, difficult, we aren't able to do it at all, then we're also not learning, because our brain's just like, nope, that's scary. That's dangerous. I don't want to deal with that. I'm not programming this in. I'm not paying attention to this. So that's why a flow state is important, is we're in that sort of sweet spot where maximum learning is occurring. And if we want to practice efficiently, then maximum learning probably sounds like a good thing to me. So that's why it's important. Now, how we sort of find a flow state, a really important part of getting into the flow on something is about the balance of difficulty. If something is very, very easy, like take long tones, for example. I think a lot of people don't even think about trying to find a flow state or really get into the zone on long tones, because they're just like, oh, it's a super simple exercise. I'll play through the notes because my teacher said to, but it's kind of boring and I'm just going to go through the motions on it. And when we do that in our long tones, we get very little benefit out of them. And that's because they're too easy. So our brain isn't interested in it because it's so easy. There's no challenge. Our brain doesn't have to think about it or work at it at all. Now, on the other hand, we can have something that's too difficult. If I hand the Nielsen Concerto or the Corigliano Concerto or any crazy hard piece to most people, they're going to look at it and be like, that's impossible. No, thank you. And you're not going to work on it and not going to get much out of it and just going to get frustrated. And that's what the research says about flow state, is we have to find something that's challenging and sort of near the edge of our comfort zone, but not so challenging and so beyond our comfort zone that we just get frustrated and give up on it. So that's how to find a flow state. Now, the problem is we don't always get to pick the perfect music that's in that perfect sweet spot. Yes, theoretically, there's maybe a handful of pieces in all of the repertoire that are perfectly at that challenge level for you wherever you're at in your musical journey. Unfortunately, those probably aren't the ones that you're working on, and those are really difficult to find and really difficult to even know. And also, even if you find a piece that, like, most of it is at that perfect level of difficulty, there will be some spots that are a little bit easier and a little bit boring, and some spots that are a little bit more challenging and more intimidating. So that's the sort of action step that I want you all to take in your music and in your practice this week, is adapt the music so that it fits the right level of challenge for what you need to enter the flow state and achieve that maximum level of learning in your music. So how do we do this? Let's take the long tone example. Just playing through the notes of the long tones, super easy. Brain doesn't have to think about it. You can just go through the motions and get pretty much no benefit out of it. However, if we take those long tones and we say, I'm going to play the notes as written, but I'm going to expand my awareness a little bit, and I'm really going to focus on the sound quality, or I'm going to really focus on what is my embouchure shape, and is my embouchure staying steady, and how are the pressures of the embouchure engaging with the reed, or the tongue position, or the flow of the air, all the way from like the diaphragm through the throat, over the tongue position, aiming at the reed. How fast is the air? What's the temperature of the air? What's the pressure of the air? All of those different variables. Then we can start to actually have some sort of challenge in our long tones, and we can start to really engage with it and have our brain be thinking about it, because we're going deeper with it and we're raising the level of challenge for that music. The same thing goes the opposite way. Anybody watching this could work on the Nielsen Concerto. It might take like years and years and years of working on it to be able to perform it, but anybody could work on it and have satisfying work on it by simplifying the music. Taking just one run at a time, going slow enough that you can figure it out, maybe even simplifying it to just figuring out, okay, what are those notes? What are going to be the best fingerings? Okay, now I'm going to do that just really, really slow, maybe even with no rhythm to start. And then I'm going to do it with the rhythm, but still extremely slow. By simplifying the music down, you can learn anything and make anything, no matter how challenging it is, at an appropriate level for you. And that's the key to effective and efficient practice, and the key to finding the flow state in your practice, is to either expand your awareness and get pickier on the stuff that's very, very easy, or simplify the music on the stuff that's very hard so that it feels manageable. So that's the thing that I want you to be thinking about in your practice this week is this something that's really easy that I'm just going through the motions? Then get pickier with it. Is this something that's kind of challenging, kind of frustrating, kind of difficult? Then simplify it. And there's no shame in simplifying at all, because when you do that simplification, you're making it so you can learn it better and learn it faster and engage your brain more and feel more satisfied in practice. I don't think there should be any shame in that at all. So however slow you need to go, however small of a chunk you need to do, if you just need to count the rhythms, that's fine. If you just need to finger through the notes, that's absolutely fine. Do whatever it takes to feel comfortable and confident and in control with how simplified it is, and keep the brain engaged. So you can adjust the sweet spot no matter what music you're working on, is hopefully the moral of the story. That's clear. Now, last but not least, for our Monday Music Motivation, we get to fill out our template and make that plan. You can go to quickstartclarinet.com/get started to find this in my free members area, along with a bunch of other awesome free handouts and tips and tricks, or you can just make it for yourself. Date for the week, reflection of how things are going for you, your goal for what you're going to do this week, and then your plan for when you're going to do it. And that plan, I think, is the most important part, and maybe even the most important part of the plan is taking that plan and putting it in your calendar, putting it in your planner, doing whatever it takes to actually commit to those practice times and actually show up for them to make the practice happen. Because if you just keep inching ahead and keep putting in the work, then you're going to get better, especially if you're adjusting the difficulty of everything you're working on to find that flow state, maximize the brain engagement, thus maximizing the learning of it as well and the growth. So thanks so much for joining for this week's live Monday Music Motivation. I hope that you all have a fantastic week, and I will see you next week for the next live Monday Music Motivation. Happy practicing, everybody. Find those flow states in your practice this week.